We've already this year gone into detail about South African history, the predating people, the Kung and the other Bushmen, the arrival of the Dutch in 1600, the arrival of the British in 1800, the Voortrek, Shaka's empire, the Mfcane after his death, the Anglo-Boer War of 1899 to 1902 or 3, South Africa supporting Britain in World Wars I and II. The party that ruled South Africa during the early 20th century was the Union Party, and it was led by a guy named Jan Christian Smuts, who, oddly enough, is also one of the founders of the holistic movement and philosophy of holism. It's like looking at everything as a whole, not as discrete parts. But in 1948, after World War II, the Union Party lost a critical election to the African National Party. The African National Party was the party of the irreconcilable Afrikaners, the Dutch Africans who were anti-British during the Boer War and during the World Wars, and now they're in charge. And these Afrikaners under the National Party, after winning in 1948, elections do matter, establish a policy known as apartheid. In Afrikaans, which is the African variant of Dutch, apartheid means separation, separateness. So everyone has a passport in South Africa under apartheid, and that passport delineates your race, and your race determines what rights you have and what rights you don't have. At the top are the Afrikaners, the Dutch African descendants. Below them are the English Africans, the white Africans, mostly living around Cape Town. Then you've got part blood mulattoes or mixed bloods, Euro-Asians. Then you've got the Asians from India and Pakistan and so forth. Then you've got mixed blood Asian Africans. Then you've got the Zulus at the top of the Africans. Then you've got other groups of Africans. Everything is determined by race, where you can live, what work you can do. Rhodesia never did this, but South Africa does. And the apartheid regime becomes epic around the world as the most racist regime since Hitler's Germany, obsessed with race. Early in the 1960s, the African National Congress, not to be confused with the African National Party. The African National Party are the party of the Boers, the Afrikaners, the African Dutch. The African National Congress is an alliance of left-wing African national parties under a leader named Nelson Mandela. And they are activated by the attempt to strip English from schools and replace English with the Afrikaans language. One of the benefits of being South African up to this point is English is the global language right now, and learning English gave South Africans an advantage over people elsewhere because they would know English. But learning Afrikaans is useless outside of South Africa. So resistance began. Some violent, some non-violent. Mugabe was arrested in the early 1960s after a massacre of school children by the Afrikaners called the Sharpeville Massacre. Mugabe is held in prison from the early 1960s until about 1990 as the Cold War is winding down. In prison, he observes other African National Congress leaders being tortured and killed. He himself is tortured on several occasions. Finally, Afrikaners elect F.W. de Klerk as the Prime Minister or President of South Africa. In 1990, as the Berlin Wall has fallen, as the Soviet Union is falling apart, as the Cold War is ending, de Klerk does something I thought never would happen. He starts negotiating with Mugabe, with Nelson Mandela, the leader of the African National Congress, the one who was arrested after Sharpeville, the one who's been in jail since the early 1960s. Mandela is released from prison, and he resumes his leadership of the African National Congress. His corrupt wife, Winnie, and her para-communist leaders is pushed aside, and Mandela, with de Klerk and the Afrikaners negotiating, becomes the first president of a multiracial South Africa. A new constitution is written for South Africa, a post-apartheid constitution, and now we have a black president. But unlike Mugabe, Mandela, who was imprisoned longer than Mugabe, was treated worse. Instead of following a policy of retribution, Mandela follows a policy of reconciliation. There are tribunals to bring out war crimes and other crimes against humanity committed under the apartheid regime. But in general terms, Mandela says that property rights will be respected and that the economy will remain free market and that this is a country for whites, Asians, and black Africans of many tribes. This policy turned South Africa into the only economic success story on the African continent south of the Sahara Desert after independence. South Africa is the only fully industrialized sub-Saharan African country. And from the mid-1990s until the mid to late 2010s, Mandela's multiracial system prevailed. However, Mandela died in 2013, 2014. And Mandela's death put other people in charge. And those other people have been making increasing noises about following a Mugabe policy of retribution, of stealing white property, and of forcibly changing the economy of South Africa from a free market economy that benefits all to a command economy that is socialistic, that's going to benefit blacks at the expense of everyone else who's not black. And since this change has happened, South Africa's economic miracle has begun shaking apart. It hasn't yet fully gone under, but it could. The policies of theft and retribution have never worked anywhere where they were tried. But for reasons of politics, the new leaders of the African National Congress and the new president of South Africa are making noises about pursuing them. And the rule of law, which is the predicate for all advanced economic activity, is breaking down. So that's South Africa. Next time, elsewhere in the third world.